Keynes said it many years ago that it's an invisible tax that only one man in a million really understands, and it's a tax on people that have had faith in their currency that the government's issued. The best protection, the best investment against inflation is to...
In the 10-year period before 2021, average inflation was around 2% year over year in the United States. But ever since early 2021, inflation has steadily increased and actually shot up to 8.6% in May, a 40-year high, and effectively quadrupling inflation. And the pain of higher prices not only affects consumers in the United States, no, also consumers all around the world. In the euro area, for example, annual inflation was 8.1% in May 2022. In Canada it was 7.7%, and in the UK inflation hit 9.1% as especially soaring food and energy prices continue to increase the cost of living. Governments and central banks around the world are of course trying their very best to get inflation under control. But of course these large institutions are not the only ones that can try to protect you and the purchasing power of your money from inflation. No, of course, you can also do your fair share to combat inflation. And so in this video, I will present a 5-question fight back against inflation checklist that you can use to assess whether you are well prepared to come out ahead during a period of rising inflation. Alright, hey there, my name is René Zellman, and of course, while being worried about inflation is okay and arguably normal, making decisions based on fear, making decisions based on your emotions usually leads to poor financial outcomes. So in order to make rational, financially savvy decisions, it's important to have a plan. And there's no better way to stick to a plan than having a checklist. And this brings us to the first question on my fight back against inflation checklist, which is, are you tracking your expenses and paying attention to your savings rate? Answering this question is important because an often overlooked way to fight inflation is actually to reduce your spending and consequently increase your savings rate. Because depending on your lifestyle and your current savings rate, the impact of inflation may be more or less dramatic. Essentially, if you are a net saver and if your expenses do not exceed your income, well, then you are less affected by high inflation than the CPI headline inflation number may suggest. And if you even have a very high savings rate, you are to a certain extent almost unaffected by inflation. And I've actually visualized this relationship in a previous video of mine and explained it in detail with the help of 2 examples. So if you want to get a better understanding of this idea, I highly recommend watching this video right after watching this video, of course. But put in a nutshell, the idea here is that, say, if inflation is 10%, then someone with a savings rate of 50% will see his or her cost of living only go up by 5%. The math is actually quite simple to calculate how the headline inflation rate impacts your monthly expenses relative to your monthly income. All you need is the inflation rate and your savings rate. The formula essentially looks like this, and I would urge you to do the calculation for yourself at home. But just to provide a few examples here, if your savings rate is 0%, well, then you absolutely experience the headline inflation rate. And you either need to cut your costs or you need to quickly renegotiate your salary with your boss. On the other hand, someone with a 80% savings rate only experiences inflation of 2%. So if that person can renegotiate a pay raise of just 2%, he or she can still save the same amount each month. Basically, the higher your savings rate, the lower the inflation rate that you are actually going to experience in your everyday life, and the lower the required pay raise to offset inflation. Now, as I said, I would urge you to do the calculation for your own situation at home, and feel free to share where you live, the inflation rate that you are experiencing in that country right now, and your current savings rate in the comments down below. Now, you're all familiar with Warren Buffett's longtime friend and business partner, Charlie Munger. And he has actually expressed the same idea that I just shared with you during the 2004 Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting. He said, one of the great defenses to being worried about inflation is not having a lot of silly needs in your life. So, the current high inflation environment may be a great opportunity to re-examine what you really need and what not. And this brings us to our second question. Are you spending your money consciously and strategically? If you're really feeling the impact of inflation on your wallet and only have a small financial buffer, then spending your money smartly may be another way of protecting the purchasing power of your money. As you might know, the reported headline inflation rate is the development of the prices of a basket of consumer goods and services. It's the weighted average of the price changes of the different items in that basket. And so some categories carry a larger weight than others, and most importantly, some of these items or goods experience larger price changes than others. So of course, you can reduce the impact of inflation if you spend your money consciously in the categories that experience particularly steep price increases. The prices of used cars, for instance, went through the roof ever since mid-2020. The average price of a new home relative to the disposable income available to US citizens is also at a record high. And so if you can postpone some of your purchases, especially bigger purchases, like for example a new car, this might protect your finances in an environment of rising costs. Instead, you might want to invest that money so that it can grow in line with inflation, or ideally at a rate above the inflation rate, so that you can deploy that cash once prices for used cars, for instance, have come down or at least normalized. And this brings us to the remaining 3 questions of our inflation checklist. But the first 2 questions were, I would say, personal finance related questions. The last 3 questions of our checklist focus on the investment side of things. So first of all, is your money invested in superior assets that protect the purchasing power of your money? While cash is obviously a terrible investment right now, as it is yielding a negative 8%, and treasury bonds too are yielding negative real returns, stocks on the other hand are, in my opinion, the best asset class to be invested in to combat inflation. Historically, US stocks have delivered nominal returns of around 10% annually and real returns, so the return after inflation, of around 6 to 7%. The annual returns are not distributed evenly, of course. During some years, stocks will decline, and during others, they will be up a lot. But as this chart here shows, if you can afford to have a long investment time horizon, the stock market will reward you and protect or even increase the purchasing power of your money. So of course, you want to have a lot of exposure to this asset class because no other asset class has actually delivered similar rates of return. I know that the average citizen doesn't have a lot of confidence in stocks as an asset class. So if that's you, I urge you to become educated on the stock market and how it actually works. Because stocks represent actual ownership stakes in businesses. And businesses, just like you, are of course impacted by inflation. So if they don't want to fall victim to inflation, they too need to find ways to navigate a high inflation environment and ways to battle inflation. And the most common way for businesses to battle inflation is to raise prices. Companies with low capital needs that can raise prices above the cost of inflation without losing customers are extremely valuable because each dollar of price increases translates into an additional dollar of pre-tax profit. Unfortunately, these businesses are also really rare. As Warren Buffett has famously said, the single most important decision in evaluating a business is pricing power. If you've got the power to raise prices without losing business to a competitor, you've got a very good business. And so the fourth question on our Fight Back Against Inflation checklist is your money invested in strong companies of above average quality that possess pricing power? Generally speaking, those are businesses with highly differentiated products that offer a lot of value to customers. And I would argue that especially businesses with very strong brands might have the ability to sustainably raise prices above the cost of inflation. Common examples would be Apple or Louis Vuitton, but yeah, businesses with high switching costs software businesses like Adobe, which basically offer the go-to software solutions for everything photo, video, or design related, well, they certainly also have a lot of pricing power. Okay, finally, by far the best investment that you can make to be well prepared during a period of high inflation is to invest in yourself. So the last question of our checklist is, are you continuously educating yourself in ways that impact both your career and your financial situation positively? An investment in yourself is tax-free, and if educating yourself can eventually translate into a better paying job because of a new role that you have received, or maybe an entirely new job at a different company, or maybe an additional income source, well, then you can better offset the impact of increasing cost of living, of course. This idea was actually also stressed by Warren Buffett during the Berkshire Hathaway meeting in 1999, where he explained why maximizing one's talents and becoming more productive is so critical.
The best investment against inflation is to improve your own earning power, your own talents. Very few people maximize their talents. And if you increase your talents, they can't tax it while you're doing it. They can't take it away from you. So if you become more useful in your activities, your profession, doctor, lawyer, whatever it may be, that is the best protection against a currency that might decline at a rapid rate.
Now, I have actually released a couple of videos on the topic of inflation. So if you want to start educating yourself, want to become a better investor, want to understand how businesses are impacted by inflation and why exactly some businesses are particularly hard hit, check out this video next. And if you want to understand why the impact of inflation on individuals varies, click here.